Hi,
Hello,
how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Thanks for coming, Dr. Kerry. How are you? How are you this morning?
I'm fine. I'm well. I'm outside, so there's fresh air, but
Wonderful,
also
wonderful.
some noises as well. So hopefully it'll be okay. How are you doing?
Oh, yeah,
How's your
absolutely,
evening?
absolutely, absolutely. Just that I had dinner just few time back, so it's all
Yes.
well. I'm very excited to have our first Instagram live with you.
Likewise, likewise. I know. Thank you for your support and the podcast that we did about a year ago, I guess it was.
Yes, yes, indeed it was. It's almost a year ago. Yes.
Yeah, and things are definitely moving forward in lots of different directions. So it's good.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So. To start with, let me just introduce you to our audience. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Dipankar. I come from Terry Exports. I'm managing partner there, and we are totally into exports of Moringa, which is a herbal product, a native for India. And today we have in the Moringa Talk episode, we have Dr. Carrie Waterman, who has been into Moringa research since long. She has been, I think, past 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Carrie.
About that, yeah.
Since past 20 years, she has been into Moringa research. My goodness. So how has your experience been, first of all, if you can just share with our audience, Dr.
Yeah,
Carrie?
and I should say I was introduced maybe to Moringa about 22 years ago in West
Ouch.
Africa. And it
Mm-hmm,
was being used to treat nursing mothers and infants that were suffering from malnutrition. And there had been a
mm-hmm.
lot of work in Senegal as well. I
Yes.
then just was growing it and eating it and interested in it.
Mm-hmm,
Kind of putting it in your plant of arsenals of what you can use
mm-hmm,
to feed yourself and for medicine, and then took a break for some time and then revisited the plant and actually looking at its water purification properties
yes.
briefly during my graduate degree in Philly, and then it was really probably about 10 years ago at Rutgers that we really started looking into some of the bioactive compounds to help explain some of the
Mm-hmm,
biological activity and medicinal properties that moringa has been traditionally used for and being used for in more modern situations and ailments with diagnoses that weren't around
mm-hmm.
100 years ago.
Yes, yes.
But a lot of the underlying conditions, which we talked about, really relate to inflammation. And so that's where we see moringa having a strong effect at reducing inflammatory markers.
Wonderful, absolutely thrilling experience back in 22 years back almost. Okay, so are you drinking Moringa? Moringa this time?
No, I'm drinking coffee.
Okay, you having coffee. Okay, wonderful.
But
Yeah.
I will have moringa later. And my,
Mm-hmm,
my favorite way to have it is with the fresh leaves and lemon and ginger and honey
mm-hmm.
as like a cold tea. So
Okay.
that's what I've been
Wow.
posting. But yeah, I
Very
mean, I think
sounds very.
do you consume it every day?
Uh, I try to because I do not like the taste. I'm being very blunt and very honest, but my wife does. She likes the taste. I mean, apart from the taste, she's very addicted, or she has become a bit habitual up to moringa. She would like to have in the form of tea, so
Okay.
she likes it. Yeah, but she has stopped for some reason these days. But she likes it though. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to begin with our talk, the Moringa talk, Dr. Kerry, I would want to understand first from your side the health point of view. The very basic point of perception the Moringa has, that it's very nutritive. From the nutrition perspective, it is really a boon for the world. So how would you want to describe Moringa from the health perspective before moving to other perspective of this magical tree?
Yeah. I think that, plants provide us with, I mean, they are our source of food, whether it's through animals or the plants directly. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that they also are a source of medicine. And, their defense mechanisms against toxins in the environment and insects that are eating them, bacteria, viruses, that all comes from the chemistry that they can produce. And Moringa is really well armed with a lot of compounds to defend against, bacteria and fungal infections and these types of things. So when we consume such plants that have such great defenses, then we also absorb those defenses. So, for example, plants have polyphenolics to, antioxidants to prevent UV damage from the light that they're in all the time. So when we then consume it, it's the same type of effect that we might be getting. It's not quite like direct like that, but those are some of the health benefits, like very broadly. And as I said before, really the anti-inflammatory effects and stimulation of the NRF2 pathway, which is in the liver, which involves detoxification and these types of things. So, the modern, whatever we're facing, whether it be environmental or physical, the moringa can help boost our immunity, fight off infections. And this is kind of a duality of these medicinal properties and then as well as the just straight up nutritional content. So you can't fight off, infection if you don't have protein and vitamin C and vitamin A and iron and all of those things that makes your cells function and your body function. So it's like taking things to a higher level to be able to, some people call them adaptogens, although that's not really a term I would say in this field, but it's hard to kind of nail down sometimes because it is broad, and people say moringa can treat or address, a lot of different diseases. And that kind of gets to the explanation of that. I think there's still a lot to be discovered with moringa. There have only been a few clinical studies, but yet the history of its use in food and medicine is long, extensive, and across several continents. It's amazing to see how plants move and how communities and cultures use those. People, in the Philippines and India generally will eat the pods, whereas, here in the US, we're having, dried leaf powder in smoothie form, So there's a lot of different ways to consume it, but I think those are some of the health benefits. And just that green leafy vegetables are really good for you. And this one is very dense. And so, it's kind of, it's one of many plants, but it's a good one, I think.
Since you mentioned about the studies, during our last interaction, Dr. Carrie, one thing got into my mind that, whenever you are talking to a scientist or, someone who is from doctor community or the research background, they always talk about the research. They sort of explain beautifully and they elaborate very well. But they still, at the end, they say, we still require a lot more studies needs to be done, etc. So that is something, I come from science background and business background. So I get confused, but yeah. So initially I get, wow, that these are the, very insights that I'm getting. But at the end, when you're speaking to a doctor like yourself or the scientist, you tend to, you get to know that, okay, more research needs to be done on that. So
yeah, it's, there's just, our health is so tricky, and it's related to a lot of different things like our genetics and our environment, and there's also our mind, right? And the placebo effect is really strong sometimes. And so when we think that we're taking something that's going to make us healthier, it often can. And that in itself is a really beautiful and powerful tool in our health, actually.
Correct.
But the other part of it is that if you want to say that this, if you want to advise people who have diabetes to take moringa, you want it to be an effect that's beyond a placebo, right?
Yes.
And and so I think, I'm always in this conundrum too, kind of between Western and Eastern medicine, right? Where they want things to be really reductionist, where there's one disease state and one drug that hits one target, and it's rarely like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of things start to happen in the body when you have metabolic syndrome, when you have diabetes. It's the liver, it's the kidneys, it's the heart, it's the blood, everything. And so you kind of, you have to take both of these approaches. And then that also goes for this. You could say, how come, a clinical study with a new drug that went through the FDA in the last 25 years is approved, but a plant that's been used for 10,000 years and has shown to be
Centuries,
safe
yes.
still can't get that? But that's just because we're in this we're in a system, and
Yes.
it's tied to money and these very strict rules of clinical studies. I mean, and I would put the question back to you, and that's been put to me, is if moringa is so great and so healthy, how come it isn't, more widespread? Um, and that has lots of different, potential answers. I think some of it is just that it's not known, and then there could be some resistance from, the industry on a lot of these things. I think garlic and
Yes.
ginger, turmeric, these are powerful tools that we have in our kitchen to keep us healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they're not always as accessible, I would say. So.
Yes, absolutely. So on, do you personally take herbal things or herbal green medicines or green powders apart from your scientific background? So do
Yeah,
you personally take these things?
sometimes, but I'm not a big, not like, I take garlic and ginger, right? Like
Oh
I
yes.
definitely the food things and keeping just like a lot of vegetables, fiber to keep
Mm-hmm.
things moving, all of that stuff. I don't have a cabinet full of like every herb. It's not like that, because the other thing is, in the US, I'm not sure how it is in India, with Ayurvedic medicine, but it's not regulated by the FDA. And so
Yes.
that's good in some ways because
We
it keeps the
have,
cost down, but then you don't
yeah,
know,
I
it
mean,
can be adulterated or.
uh in terms of regulation here, Dr. Kerry, we have a government here, which is supporting a lot to bring the Ayurvedic medicine or the traditional medicines of India, which used to be a boon for ancient India back in thousands of years ago. When these medicines, the pharmaceutical ones, which arrived around 100 or 200 years ago, probably not more than
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, people would take just these herbal medicines to get themselves cleaned and get themselves detoxed or get themselves rejuvenated or treat themselves. So that was thing. So, but down the line, somewhere down the line, the world have become a bit modern after, especially after 1800s. So we are living in the internet era, especially due to the Western dominance, or I would say the Americanization of the world. People are, they are after the pharmaceutical medicines. So I believe
Yeah.
that is something, because, it's a system that you mentioned. There's a system. So I'm not going into the detail of that system because that's out of scope of the talk.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that system, sort of things are bit inclined. But yeah, on the regulation side here in India, Dr. Kerry, government is taking care, these sort of things, these medicines, herbal medicines, especially, or the traditional Indian food and medicines. People start taking care of themselves with these food, especially after pandemic, the
Interesting.
COVID-19,
Yeah.
the recent one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, and I
okay.
think
From the
that,
medical, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
No,
Go
I,
ahead,
I
go ahead.
think
I
that
was
that's,
about to ask a second question. Yeah.
just seeing how COVID is playing out as well, and new strains continuing to come out. I continue to think that we need to focus on our food, and our health from kind of a self-determined way, and not
Mm-hmm.
through medication. And so I think that's
Mm-hmm.
becoming, hopefully, more apparent to people. But I wouldn't say that the government here is pushing that at all, or, The
Okay.
CDC doesn't recommend you, they haven't said, hey, don't forget to eat your fruits and vegetables, get some sleep, get water, be around
Correct,
nice
correct.
people. So yeah, that
Which
matters
makes
too.
sense actually. Which makes sense, to be honest. It's not
Yeah.
totally wrong or indifferent. They might have different perception.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's got a lot of potential, not just with health, but I think we had
Hmm.
said what our second question was on climate change. Was that right? Did you want to move
Yes,
to
I
that
was.
one?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So before I move on to the climate change, Dr. Carey, I would want to ask the health perception of moringa from the miracle tree perception. I mean, the tree is termed as the miracle tree, and why it is termed as a miracle tree from the health point of view? Is it really miraculous, or it prevents or cure diseases? In that sense, it is termed as, by the few magazines, by Time magazine, they have termed it as king of herbs or the miracle tree, or there
Yeah.
are a lot of other names as well for moringa.
I think it does have a lot to do with the multitude of health uses and also just the
Hmm.
multitude of uses. So you're talking
Hmm.
about water purification, you're talking about fencing, food, medicine,
Hmm.
all these
Hmm.
different, all these different applications. And then I think I would also say that it's really resilient. And so I mean, when I saw my pot growing, I was like, "Oh, it's a miracle it came back." I didn't think this thing was alive anymore, and
Yes,
I think that might be a part of it too. It's growth
I often see them
performance.
on your stories and your Instagram posts, your pods.
Yeah, I mean, I have some at my house, but I'm not a large scale farmer that's operating, massive rows of them
Yeah,
or
absolutely. Yeah,
anything.
I know. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's an interesting, like you really have to cultivate the plant to get to know it. It is a little different, and there's different varieties of seeds. But I think
Hmm.
that's part of it is that you can cut it back and it will grow again. And
Oh
I
yes,
don't know of
absolutely. It does.
another
It does.
tree that has edible
Hmm.
leaves. Yeah, and so there's just a lot of unique properties. But I mean, I hesitate to use that term because it makes it sound out of this world or impossible, and
Hmm.
it takes it away from a kind of grounded scientific perspective on it, that the plant and there are other plants, and I never want to put one at the top
Absolutely.
necessarily either, although I put a lot of focus into it. I mean, there are other leafy green
Yes.
vegetables that have high levels of some of the nutrients that moringa has, but can it grow in rapid places and produce food so quickly?
Hmm.
um, yeah, and I think what people have seen with it. I mean, we just published a paper with Pamoja in Kisumu in Kenya that showed that just with the small cohort that it increased breast milk supply in nursing mothers. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, it's just ironic too. Like in the U.S. right now, we have a infant formula shortage, and then here's moringa that can, for people who can breastfeed, could produce more milk. And then climate change, we've got all these issues with how do we grow food without so much water. Well, then what are the miracle, or what are the smart crops often that I say that can be used to
Hmm.
address these things? So that's what makes moringa kind of have this term, I think, as well. And
Miracle. Yes.
yeah, and with
Okay.
that, it's about really rapid growth, carbon sequestration.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
why it's been noted with for climate change and climate action. I think planting
Perfect.
trees in general is what we need to be doing. As one thing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is a good one that can be grown and then has multiple uses.
Yes. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So moving on to the climate change perspective of the moringa, as you recently mentioned about it, you broadly mentioned why it is being giving it that, from the multidimensional perspective that it it is used as it can be used as a tool for the climate change. So please talk more about that. How do you propose as a scientist, as a researcher, that how moringa can be used for a climate change? I'm sure someone from the government might be listening to this talk, and we can propose them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do it a little more professionally if it's for the government. But I would say that, what are the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions are really come
Yes.
from transportation and power plants.
Mm-hmm.
And those industrial agriculture relies on a lot of, fertilizer, pesticides, these types of things that all are made in factories, require energy, carbon combustion, all of that. So with Moringa, what I think we're really talking about is that if you have a farm and you have livestock, or you have some type of agroforestry system, or you have a backyard garden, you can grow this plant, and it can be your plant that you sell or eat. It can also be used to feed your animals, and it can also be used to feed your other plants. So even if you're a corn maize farmer or a strawberry farmer, you could grow moringa on 5 or 10% of your land and now produce an
Mm-hmm.
on-site supply of fertilizer. So by doing that, you're also cutting off all the transportation and all the costs to bring in wherever you were previously getting that from. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a one step thing of, oh, we have this instead of this. If you do it on site or in close by facilities, you can access those relatively quickly on site. One of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases is methane from cows, and Moringa has been shown, I think, in probably 10 or 15 studies that I've already referenced, to show that it can reduce methane production from cows that are consuming it.
Yes.
And so we're
Yes.
really trying to push this idea and promote it and develop better experimental models to really prove it. But that's definitely been shown with other things too. So altering the diets of cows to include more plant-based materials, even seaweed. They've done some work at UC Davis. I think you were the one that sent me that article.
Yes. Yes.
Is a good example. So I think those are, on-site production, that you have these multiple uses for human consumption, animal consumption, fish feed. You can put it into fish feed, the whole fish food industry, pet food, and
Oh, is
then
it?
also, yeah, and then
Okay.
also as fertilizer. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely an area I thought about exploring, because I'm not really an advocate for pets, I'll be honest. I think it's kind of a luxury unless it's a guard dog or something. But in the US, people have a lot of domesticated animals to keep them happy.
Yes.
And they often get diabetes and have illnesses themselves. So the moringa could be integrated into pet food, medicinal pet food, basically. But so
Okay.
that's
That's
kind
wonderful.
of the climate smart aspect, is that it addresses these social issues, economic issues. There needs to be more work done with economics of moringa. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, the plant is so great, so should I start a moringa business? And that's when I give them
Yes.
your
Yes.
number. That's when I give them your number.
Of
um,
course. Of course.
and it's hard, right? Sales is different regardless of whether the plant is phenomenal or not, right? You still have to market it and sell it, have quality control, have supply and
Yes.
demand, all of that. um, so I think that gets a little more complicated, but you can still sell it on a local market or trade it, being able to use it as an ingredient. So, and one thing I think that I haven't focused on as much, but also the biodiesel is another use of the plant, and biochar and these types of things that could be applied as well. So I think when you have
Okay.
something that has multiple uses, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, on climate change perspective, Dr. Carey, you mentioned carbon sequestration. So I would understand that if we bring the role of government here and they promote farmers at war footing level, at very humongous scale, people start growing moringa, because it is useful for the food security as well. Because people these days, they are growing just 3 crops, rice, maize, and corn. So it's not good for the for the food security, especially after the war that we have been going through, Russia and the Ukraine war. That's been the unfortunate thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, as an alternative food, and it's helpful for the nutrition and for the malnutrition, for the lesser developed economies, LDCs to say so. So I mean, how do you see that? You know, because it's not just for the benefits of one perspective. Because if you are growing moringa, you are helping the environment across the value chain. You are just getting the product out of it, and it's helping a lot different sectors of the world. So, I mean, how do you see that, especially from the government perspective? If you, as a scientist, were to
Yeah, I
advise
mean,
government, how do you see that role?
I think there just needs to be, I think there would be need to be some kind of large scale investment or upfront investment at the government level, because it's, you kind of have to
Yes.
scale up that economy and you have to have support. And the crops that you speak of, corn and rice and soy, my understanding is they definitely had government support in their expansion and industrialization, right? And they still do, at
Yes.
least in the
Yes.
US. I mean, corn,
True. True.
if you're a rice farmer in California, you got insurance. You get paid whether you produce or not sometimes with some of these industrial crops. So again, just like with the health, we don't have an agricultural system at scale for moringa
Yes.
yet. I do believe people in Israel have gotten it quite large scale, and that would be a good place to look and potentially go visit to see some of those models, and obviously India as well.
Yes.
So it's there. It just needs the support, I think, from the government. And there are places to go and look and see at where it's at kind of at the largest level. And that would be useful
Hmm.
kind of for you and I to really, look at which companies are kind of at the forefront of, if they wanted to take it to the next scale, what would this look like? Like, how many center drying points are you going to have? These types of things. So a lot of work done by Newton Amalgo as well, out of Ghana. He spent some time in China and looking at the tea
Hmm.
production systems. But I think we're really trying to encourage agroforestry, where the moringa is integrated in, and you can plant things at different times, and the moringa can create shade for other crops to grow underneath,
Yes.
that type of thing. So I think that it just needs some planning, and hopefully some organization to bring things together. I went to the Moringa conference, and there are groups like within Africa and India and South
Hmm.
America and the US, but it's
Yes.
still pretty
Yes.
desperate. It's not like coffee or these other organizations that
Yes.
really
Yes.
have,
Yes.
there's no global standard for Moringa at this time, right?
Correct. Correct. And therefore
And
that brings the role of government here to sort of standardize, and they promote
yeah,
moringa to the world, and
and
people
that,
start consuming it for the betterment of the world. Yeah.
yeah. And that's where you need, I think, like WHO, FAO support, and then also
Yes.
specific governments that
Correct.
want to invest. But I mean, I'm curious to see it really played out. I know Cuba spent a lot of money and investment.
Oh
Um,
yes. Yes. Yes.
yeah, I heard
Yeah.
rumor that part of the reason Fidel Castro lived so long was because he was eating moringa, but I don't
Yeah,
know that.
I was reading an article in the last conversation. I think I mentioned the same about Fidel Castro to you. So
So maybe you were the one who told me that then. that's
yes, yes,
that's
I told
great.
you.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and I've seen a quote of his, so I mean, even in Kenya, the president had said that he advocated for moringa. He wanted to see it at all the schools, but there wasn't necessarily investment from him to do that, even though there are
Hmm.
probably 20 moringa companies within Kenya alone.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
think the industrialization of it, kind of to say, a global scale, could use some work maybe over the next several years, and then
Yes.
marketing it too, right? Like, you
Oh
almost need
yes.
it
Yes.
integrated into, what if it was like fortified flour, right? They add, or iodine and salt,
I
I mean
think
that.
yeah, people like you
Like,
and I should be doing a lot more.
yeah, but if you think of things on that type of scale, like how when they added iodine to salt, and all salt around the world is pretty much iodized, that's, That's what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
like adding moringa into fortified flours that go out to
Yes,
every,
yes.
through the WHO program, World Health Program,
WHO, yes. Correct,
or
correct, correct.
grain mixes. Almost every culture eats some type of porridge, grain porridge in the mornings or for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always add
Mm-hmm.
moringa to that. So, for me, I've always been interested in going through the government. I feel like they have a lot of money and it's a more
Yeah.
interesting space sometimes than commerce to me. So looking for funding from them, to support like their local communities or their local programs, I think would be interesting. Trying to
Wonderful,
pitch to them.
wonderful. Best wishes from my side from Dairy Exports.
Well,
I
hopefully
think
you'll
that,
be hopefully you'll be able to help too.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, Moving on from climate change to the animal feed, which is one of my favorite topics about Moringa. How do you see animal feed playing? How do you see animal feed is helpful in terms of feeding Moringa to the animals or the cow especially? We recently mentioned about the quantity and the quality of milk yield gets increased, not just for humans, but for animals, especially cows. So how do you see
Yeah.
that, the role of moringa as animal feed to cows and animals and how we should be taking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you can look at this from an economic perspective of yield is obviously important to someone who has cows, right? If they're selling the milk or the
Yes,
meat, then the more they get, the more they can sell. And the faster
yes.
the cow is able to produce that, is also a big deal. So, yeah, moringa has been shown to increase the milk supply in cows as well as humans and pigs and other animals and lean muscle mass. So because of the high concentration of amino acids, it'll also build muscle or meat,
Yes,
right, in the
yes,
cow. So
yes. It
that's a big
increase the
part of
value
it.
of the beef. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm not an expert on ruminants. They do have this four-chambered stomach as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in industrial cow management, there's also a lot of, there can be disease and infection. Cows that are milked, often they can get infections on their nipples and stuff like that. So then you're
Mm-hmm.
pumping them full of antibiotics and this type of thing. So the moringa is not only a healthy food, but it also provides this kind of preventative mild antibiotic, right? And to fight
Okay.
off infection or disease in the
Mm-hmm.
cows. So again, you're getting your food and your medicine for the cow as well. And if you're able to grow it quickly, it can be a cheaper, better supply. So, you could say, well, the corn is cheaper than the moringa, but maybe the moringa is cheaper than the corn and the medication and the cow that we lost because of this reason or that. So,
Yes.
um, and then there's also kind of the ethical side of it is that you'd hopefully want to have healthier, happier cows. And so, if they're well nourished and they're not sick, then that can also help them. So I think that it has a lot of potential, and probably this has been explored for over 20 years. This was one of the first reasons that
Yes.
they tried the intensive cultivation of moringa was for animal feed. Um,
Yes.
so
Correct.
it's
That's true.
it's quite it's quite interesting to see this all coming again to the headlines. It's I believe you sent me an article, yeah, from UC Davis, where they have a model where cows can eat under this hood, and so when whatever they're eating, they then belch out the gases from it. And a machine that's the hood that's above them absorbs it and can measure how much methane is being produced after they eat. So we're
Wow.
trying to,
Okay.
yeah, we're trying to work with that group. They had done some work with seaweed as well. So we have one
Mm-hmm.
application in to explore that more. It's hard to measure, I think, and sometimes people are hesitant. I know that the livestock industry here in the U.S. has said that they don't really feel a lot of culpability, I think, with the methane emissions. And they said that because there's an easy way to measure them, that they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
mandate people limit them. They'll just encourage farmers to try new feeds and stuff like that. It can also be put into the silage for cow feed, so
Yes.
that goes through the
Yes.
fermentation process. And that's a whole
Yes.
nother area. Like, what is moringa
Yeah.
sour? What are the benefits of moringa fermented in sauerkraut? So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. We're definitely shifting in that direction with grant
Mm-hmm.
applications from our end, with this multi-use, but really focusing on the cow feed. It's really important here in California and around the world.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so moving on to our last segment of this talk, Dr. Carey, which is seed to biofuel. These days, petrol and the fossil fuel, they create emissions, CO2, which is not good for the health of the planet, for the humans, for animals, for everyone, for the basic and obvious reason, we have been hearing since last many, many years by our governments. We have been having COP26, 27, and all the governments, they come together and they say that, we have been doing to bring a biofuel and whatnot, green hydrogen. But from the research perspective, I would want to understand from your perspective, how moringa can be helpful in terms of providing biofuel to the world, so that we can totally, if not totally, or to at some extent, we can eradicate our diesel, petrol, or the gas. You say in the USA, here we say petrol. Yeah. So how we can eradicate those fossil fuels?
I think I'm gonna really have to defer on this. I'm not an expert on biofuels. I know that basically
Okay.
they're extracting the oil. You can do the
Mm-hmm.
oil from the seeds, and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
work out of India with this group that had been working on jatropha oil to really
Mm-hmm.
increase the oil content. And then the properties of the oil and the characteristics of it, of what temperature it burns at, these types of things are
Mm-hmm.
important. And Moringa has really good properties, but the whole process of it and then fitting it into the industry is a bit beyond my level of expertise. I will
Okay.
say that I've been working with a postdoc. He's now not a postdoc. He's now has his PhD and fully employed in Brazil, but he had done his
Okay.
part of his postdoc work here. And he's
Mm-hmm.
in the division of biofuel in Brazil. And
Okay.
I think that it would be, and he's a full expert on moringa from the science of it to cultivation, Rafael Peron Castro. And he's,
Mm-hmm.
I can send you his contact. It would be great for you to have he'll would do a 10-minute to answer that question
Wonderful.
interview with
Oh,
him.
wow. Wonderful. Wonderful.
And he knows about some other crops that they're working on in Brazil that they're also
Mm-hmm.
using for alternative fuel crops. So,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want my personal opinion on these questions, again, it's even stepping back to say, do we need alternative ways of transportation? So, are we still going to have cars and we're putting fuel in them, or are we looking at different ways to kind of organize our lives and have more public transportation? And we have a lot of things to deal with. I was in southern India when I was a child, and I know that it's grown so much. I was just listening to a piece on the news about them using 3D printers to build houses in Chennai, and just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about how big things are and how, by the time you build a freeway, there's that many thousands of more cars on the road. So sometimes I have hesitation with like the electric vehicles and the alternative fuels we do need them. And I think like in Sweden, they're running even industrial equipment on like natural fuels and natural gases and stuff like this. So, or
Yes.
electric, I think something like that. So it's all quiet
Something
on
like
work
that. That's
sites and
correct.
stuff. Yeah, I think they're
Correct. Yes.
electric.
I've read that.
Yeah. So
Denmark is the number one country in terms of having going green in a
going
big way.
green. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a part of it, but, you know, yeah, sometimes it's not just looking for an alternative, um, you know, same thing to fill that, but a broader
Hmm.
solution. So yeah, we'll
I
see.
think, yeah, I think on biofuel, I think I need to say that more research and more studies needs to be done. I think I'm stealing your line. Allow me to steal one of your lines.
Yep,
Okay,
absolutely. I know you're always safe.
yeah.
You're like, why do these people get PhDs to say we don't really know for sure?
No,
um,
no, I just jokes apart. Okay. So it was a wonderful speaking to you, Dr. Carey, on Moringa. Absolutely, it's been a half an hour or probably more than that. I mean, it was just
Sorry,
flown
we
by, to
went
be
on. I
honest.
know we
Yeah,
were going to keep it brief, but thank you so
yeah.
much. I appreciate it. I love talking about Moringa and
Hmm.
you know, both casually and in depth. And there's definitely lots of research out there. So I encourage people
Hmm.
to get into the
Let's wait
details of the
for,
articles.
yeah, before we go, let's wait for a couple of minutes. I think if we have someone from audience, if they wanted to ask some question. I
Okay,
think grocery cropper, they say good morning, grocery cropper.
that's Keith Hudson. He's
Grocery.
here in Sacramento. He's also a Moringa grower,
Okay,
and just
okay.
he knows a lot, lots of things. Oh, good. And we're working
This was a
together. He's
great
helping me
conversation.
develop
Okay,
the
okay.
Moringa.
I think grocery croppers is here. He's
The
saying that this was a great conversation. Hmm.
Yeah,
Wonderful,
and he's helping me work on the California Moringa website so we can get more information out there.
wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, well, let's do it again in a couple months or something, and I will. I'll give you Raphael's contact, and I think it would be good to have we could do three people or grab another
Oh
person as
yes,
well. So
sincerely looking forward to that. That would be a great excitement to to have to scientific people having great enthusiasm on Moringa.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah.
it was great to catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Brazil is definitely, you know, on the map for major impact with what's happening in the
Oh
world too. So
yes,
it's
yes,
great to have a
yes.
pulse on it there. So, okay, well,
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Stay well.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Carey, once again. Before signing
Absolutely.
this conversation off, I once again sincerely appreciation from my side.
Likewise. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. See you soon once again.